G'day guys, Ben here from Engage Video Marketing, and I'm here at Social Media Marketing World in San Diego in California for the 10th annual Social Media Marketing World. And I want to ask you a question. What if you're creating long form content and there was an easy mindset shift that you could have to help you dominate in short form as well? That's Reels, TikTok, YouTube Shorts. Well, I've got Latasha James here, who is an expert in this stuff, and she's got a lot of insights to share around this. So welcome, Latasha. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell me a little bit about you. So you're a marketer, you're a content creator, and you're a coach, and you run your marketing agency as well, James and Park.
Yep.
So tell me, what got you into the world of marketing and video? And
yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I loved video growing up. I was always playing around with the camera as soon as I was able to, and I actually ended up going to school for film and video. I actually thought that I was going to work in the news. I was kind of on that broadcast track, doing a lot of on-camera work. And then I realized that just wasn't the path I wanted to go down for many different reasons. And also that I really loved the post-production side the most. I actually didn't love being on camera. Sometimes people are surprised to hear that because I'm a YouTuber, but that's not my favorite part at all. Editing is really where the magic comes to life. So I started my YouTube channel and I started I got my first freelance video client just from a friend was like, oh yeah, I have a friend who does videos and stuff. Maybe she can help you. She was an author. And I put together a video for her. And then over time, I realized this was probably 2015-ish. And video was just growing and growing on social media. So a lot of brands started hiring me to produce Facebook ad videos. And, this was obviously before stories and shorts and all that, but really social first video is how I kind of pivoted the agency, as opposed to just being at that time, it was all organic social media, just copywriting and sharing articles and things like that. So I was really able to differentiate myself by offering that video component.
Yeah. So when did you, either for your own business or your own personal brand or for a client, when did you start seeing the real power of short form video? So was it, Instagram stories first, or where did that kick off for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Instagram stories / even before that, Snapchat.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
That was really what pioneered, the platform that pioneered this stuff. And that was, at that point, I was consulting with a startup. It was an influencer marketing startup. And we were just seeing so much power from our Snapchat. We worked with a lot of other influencers doing gifted product exchanges and things like that. And that's where they would share their unboxings. That's where they would really provide that brand content. And then, of course, that translated over to Instagram stories. And I still think Instagram stories are one of the most powerful ways to connect. It's for this type of stuff when you're at a conference, just chatting back and forth, meeting people, and having that close relationship with your audience. I still think it's super powerful.
Yeah, cool. So my audience here on the podcast and probably watching on YouTube as well, that they wouldn't really call themselves content creators, right? Or YouTubers or influencers. Typically they're trying to use video to grow a business, bricks and mortar or service-based business or knowledge-based business, right? So for those people, even if they have taken the step and they're doing some sort of long-form content, might be YouTube or it might be on other platforms, there's a bit of hesitation around short form. They're kind of thinking that it's more for the influencers or for the younger crowd. Yeah. What would you say to those people?
That's me. Yeah, okay. I can totally relate. I have stomped my feet about TikTok. I'm not doing it. I'm too old for this. I don't like watching it personally. So I really hesitated, to be honest. But me protesting it isn't really going to change much. Yeah. So, we as marketers, as creators, as people who work in digital, we have to be used to change. That's the name of the game. Technology changes, platforms change, what's popular changes. So we have to be able to adapt with that. The cool thing is long form content can very easily translate over to short form content. Right. And that was kind of the mindset shift that I had to have, is that I don't need to do the same thing that a 16-year-old is doing on TikTok. And I probably shouldn't be, that doesn't make sense for my brand. That doesn't make sense for me. That doesn't feel right to me. So you have to show up in the way that does feel comfortable and that does work for your audience as well. So for me, that has been just repurposing primarily. That's how I've built really my Instagram Reels and my TikTok platform, is just by repurposing. I do the occasional, made for the app, like video, but for the most part, I'm just cutting down my existing video podcasts and posting them there.
Yeah, cool. So I want to get tactical with you into some of that strategy and how you do that in a moment. Before we do that, I'd love to get your take on what do you see as the differences or the nuances between content designed for long form and content that really takes off in short form platforms?
Yeah, great question. So long form content is really, you get that full storytelling path. Like as a video person, as a filmmaker, like we understand exposition and setting and characters and conflict. Like we understand all of those different storytelling elements, whereas short form is really to the point. And so there's elements of all of those things in any good story, but for the short form stuff, you really have to be a little bit more direct to like skip some of that fluff. People can get that in long form if they want to. I also think that short form content is really where that trendy, like in the moment stuff lives. So if there's something going on industry news wise, or there's like a big pop culture trend, short form is probably where I'd put my energy. I don't really tend to do a lot of that stuff on long form because for me, that's really evergreen. Like some of my most popular YouTube videos are 5 years old, and so I try to really have an evergreen strategy with long form. And then if I do want to comment on, something new that happened in the social media world, I'll just do that either on stories or reels or whatever.
Okay, cool. So talk us through your strategy. So, and particularly how you approach the production of the longer form content with a view that there's repurposing going to happen, because I think that there's probably ways to mess this up, right?
Yes.
In producing the wrong structure to your long form video that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Repurpose. So talk us through your strategy there.
It starts with an outline for me. I don't script really any of my videos, fully script them, but I always do an outline, just bullet points of what I'm going to talk about. And what I do is I try to keep in mind that this is going to be cut onto TikTok, Instagram, wherever, LinkedIn. And so just paying attention, maybe doing a little scan of what's trending on those platforms before I start recording my long form video, and see if there's anything that I want to make sure that I call out in that long form content. So for example, I just did a podcast that was all about, I teach social media managers how to be better at their jobs, basically. So I did a podcast that was kind of talking about why social media management is a good field to get into. So instead of just kind of freestyling it like I might normally, I did a little bit of research on LinkedIn, on TikTok to see, I found an article that shared the top digital marketing skills that were in demand. And so then I was able to say, okay, I know people love numbers, like short form, people love percentages, numbers, dollar amounts, anything that's really compelling like that. So I pulled that stat and put that into my outline so that I could make sure that I was getting that part really tight and solid in a 15, 30-second soundbite so that I could easily repurpose it at the end.
Are you thinking through that when you're recording? You're thinking, this is a soundbite that's going to be repurposed. Yeah. So when you're recording the long form, you're like, I'm going to make sure I finish my sentence and finish the idea.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm going to make sure I get that part really good. And sometimes that means I'm retaking that part maybe a couple times to make sure that it is like, okay, was that about 30 seconds? Yeah. So that I'm not rambling on, because, as a long form creator, I have a tendency to do that as we do as podcasters and stuff. And then another thing that I do is just the actual, like how I'm shooting it, zooming out just a tad, I just enough to give me enough headroom and all of that to crop it into a vertical aspect ratio.
Yeah. So I think any of us, myself included, who have tried to massage a long form 16:9 widescreen shot content into a vertical frame have come across those issues before. Yes. But just by just a little mindset shift of shooting with the repurposing in mind is what you're talking about. They're shooting a little wider, thinking about the content, some of the content in those structured bite-sized chunks. Yep. I think that's just super smart, and it doesn't require much. It's probably what you're already doing anyway. It's just like being a little bit more intentional with your production. For sure. And then when you move into post-production, are you outsourcing that or are you handling that yourself? Or what's your process to streamline that? Yeah, I do all my own editing still. I'm my own worst nightmare in that regard because I know I should probably outsource it. Yes, it's hard for me to give up. I love it. Like I love editing so much. I do all my own editing. So I use Final Cut to edit. And what I do is I use markers. Most editors have like some version of that.
while I'm listening to it again, I'll just drop a little marker in the timeline when I hear something that I'm like, that could be an interesting clip to stand on its own. So it really does, again, it doesn't add much time to the process at all. I'm just doing what I'm normally doing. And then on that final pass through before I export, I just start new events and put them into vertical format anywhere that I've dropped that flag. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. And then are you doing anything else as far as, assuming burning in captions and Are you doing that in Final Cut? We're getting very tactical now, by the way, guys, but I'm interested.
Yeah, I do. I actually use a tool called Descript.
Yeah, right.
Have you heard of it? Yeah, for captions. So it's cool because I also use that to get my transcripts or my captions, for YouTube videos, which is great. So it transcribes your video for you. It allows you to add captions on really nicely. I do not do burned in captions for TikTok. I've just found that TikTok really likes you to use their native captioning feature. Yeah. So I just export just the plain video, 16:9 video, upload that to TikTok. But for like Instagram Reels, LinkedIn, YouTube Shorts, I will burn in the captions with Descript.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. The tool that we've been using is CapCut.
Okay, yeah.
So CapCut, it's owned by TikTok. I actually don't know. It'd be interesting to test whether or not if it's created in CapCut using CapCut's titling features, whether or not that would circumvent some of those TikTok issues. But
I think
it's still a third-party tool, right? So
I feel like they want you to use CapCut, though.
Yeah.
TikTok does.
CapCut's great.
Yeah,
actually.
It is.
It's free.
And it's a free editor. I know. I've recommended it to a lot of people, too.
Awesome. So let's go into a little bit about your strategy then of once you've got these short-form pieces of content, how does it play into, is the goal... I guess another way to phrase this is I've often talked on this podcast about this idea of a tiered distribution strategy, right? Mm-hmm. So just to briefly explain that, it's the idea that you've got your hero piece of content, which is probably your long form content, and then you use these, extracts or these different shorter pieces of content to drive viewership back to the main piece of content.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, that could happen with short form, but as the industry's changed and viewing habits have changed, I think that those short pieces of content should survive on themselves. They should, drive audience behavior the way you want it to without having to see the main piece of content, right? So how do you think about that? And what's the strategic goal from those pieces of content that you're sharing on various platforms?
Yeah, great question. So the role of short form vertical video in particular is not to clickbait. I see this a lot. People will be like, oh, here, I just found out the top 3 marketing skills in demand. Click on the link in my bio to find out what they are. That doesn't work. Yep. That's not what those audiences want. They want value. They just want it in a really short period of time. So instead of doing that, I might say, hey, here's the number 1 most in-demand marketing skill. Here are 2, I talked about 2 others over on my podcast. You can tease it in a way while still giving value, while still giving a complete thought in a video. So I do think that's really important to make sure that they stand on their own. So when I am looking through those clips, I'm making sure would this make sense on its own, or, because some things you really need that additional context before or after to understand what I'm talking about.
So are you filming then some additional calls to action when you need to that won't be in the long form?
No, I usually don't.
Right.
If I do any additional calls to action, I'm just going to put them on screen with a caption or in the description.
Like text that might say, watch the full episode for a few more tips or something.
But honestly, I don't even really do that. I really don't, because I truly believe that if people like what you're providing, they're going to find you. They will find a way to get in touch. So one thing that I do is I'll sometimes tag, I have an Instagram for my podcast specifically, so I might tag my podcast in it. Or I'll actually change the audio. You know how it usually says original audio at the Latasha James? Instead, I'll change it so it says Freelance Friday Podcast or latashajames.com/podcast.
You can do that?
Yeah, I'll show you how.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll figure that out.
Yes. Because that way, if somebody does, if they're like, oh, that's a really cool clip, where can I find more of this guy? Then they can look up your podcast or your website or whatever. So adding those little brand elements, so if people really want to find you, they will. But as far as the role of short form content, I think it really does help just with brand. I personally don't see a lot of full conversions from TikTok or Instagram Reels, but what I do see is subscribers on my YouTube channel, listeners on my podcast, and that in turn, I have that funnel figured out. I've been doing this for 10 years. So then, I take that and then I can turn people into actual clients.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome. And just briefly, just in closing here, What's it done for you and your business? Like you've been doing the podcast for a while. And have you been doing video the whole time with your podcast?
About 4 years of the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
And repurposing into short form. And what's it meant for your brand, for your business?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is it's opened me up to a new audience. So, TikTok is exploding in popularity, and it's definitely not just for young people, but it still is mostly, a lot of young people, a lot of newer people who wouldn't be finding me otherwise. So it's definitely helped with that. It's funny because I'll even before I started actively posting on TikTok, I would get other people posting about my podcast on TikTok. And so that was really cool to see that, I was being introduced to this new audience, even without me necessarily doing all the hard work of doing it myself. So it's definitely helped expand the pool of listeners.
Awesome, cool. Well, let's hope to expand your pool of listeners a bit more. So if you are listening or watching, where can we find out more about you and maybe follow your podcast? And so shout out the name of the Freelance Friday.
Yeah, Freelance Friday podcast on all the listening apps. I'm Latasha James on YouTube and at the Latasha James everywhere on social, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all the things.
Excellent. Cool. Well, thanks for joining me, and I am going to stay around and pick her brain a bit more. So,
all right,
thanks
so
guys.
much for having me.
All right, thanks for watching, guys. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to click this video next over the head here, and we'll go into another expert interview here from Social Media Marketing World if you click there, and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.